the stuff in the book, because I think that that's what's going to, God's going to use most of all in you, in the way that your heart responds to this kind of stuff. And I know that we've covered a lot, and you don't have to get it all, but you do have this on the tie. And we'll go just a little further now as I attempt to move into the culture as we see it today. And how can we do this? How can we look at some of the research that's being presented, and how can it really work into our mindset, our lifestyle, and the way we approach young people? I talked a little bit about that in some of the questions before. And let's know that this tonight is just the beginning. I hope that you will have a life process of wanting to ask young people what's going on in their lives and what's going on in their culture. And that they are, for the most part, delighted to be your informants. The reason that teenagers go to church and are ignored by most adults, except adults that may say, hey, how's it going? And glad you're here, or something like that. They're ignored by most adults because adults, we are scared to death we might embarrass ourselves with a silly statement or interaction. So as a couple of us were just talking, youth ministry is a cross-cultural experience, conversation, relationship, even in the same ethnic group. Because you stepped out of teenage culture, and if you were left it for only 3 or 4 years, you come back to step into an entirely different cultural stream. It's very, very different, changing so incredibly fast. So I don't, in any sense, pretend to be an expert at what we're talking about here. And so, how do we get wisdom? The scripture is so clear that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. We've got to be humble. And the world is trying desperately to leave the humility of less education, less financial wealth, less good looks, less whatever, and move up competitively into a state of getting it. But the scriptural way of getting wisdom is almost the reverse. So let's begin in humble, eager prayer. You need to take this presentation for anything that may happen to be of worth to you, back to your church and your pastors and so forth, humbly, and asking them to help in this process of applying it to your particular situation. Humbly let us listen to youth, the culture, the world, and secular experts, and consider this biblically with open minds. That's what we're doing here tonight. I heard in 1970 a West Coast leader, I think he may still be alive, I don't know, but anyway, Earl Palmer said this. Now, I often give this out to my classes. This has meant an awful lot to me. It's awesome to me. And I hope you'll think about it. The world is for the learning of the church. And the church is for the healing of the world. Everything that the church does, everything that this Christian research group does, they picked up from the world. Our music, everything we do comes from the world. And then we're meant to give something back to the world, and that's the healing that the body of Christ, the beloved community, can give. I hope that that brings a little bit of wisdom to you. So how do we grow in cultural wisdom, which is sort of a general theme for tonight? By relating and listening to young people. I want to say again and again, with the right relationship, young people are eager to clue you in. They're eager to meet adults who care about them, who don't get it, don't know, don't understand it. And that adult says, can you help me? And I could tell many, many stories from youth ministry on young people who were helped by youth ministers, did not really come alive or get it until there was a situation in which they needed to help the youth minister. And then things came alive. They want to be helpers. And then by watching and listening to what they are watching and listening, are you willing to do that? Just waste a little bit of time. You see, the incarnation, you believe that, Doctor? Do you love it? The incarnation is about God wasting time. And I had a close friend and a priest, somewhat of a mentor to me, who he and his wife, and there's a long story about these people I'd love to tell you, but just to say, he and his wife were infertile. They could not have children. And so they adopted a child here in Massachusetts from Catholic Charities that's very, very reputable. And they brought the child home and embraced it. And the next day or the day after, Catholic Charities called up and said, we want to apologize. We made a terrible mistake. You got the wrong baby. The baby that you got is a hydrocephalic. No brain at all. You can put a flashlight up to one ear and it will shine right through the other. And it's going to die. And this godly priest and his wife, who was also a priest, said, but we're already starting to love this child. And who in the world would love this child the way we do? We can't take Matthew back. We've already named him. So Matthew lay on their couch as we go to visit, and some of their friends stopped visiting them because to watch this child's head grow and grow and grow until the head was the heaviest part. I carried that child from a car into the house. The head was heavier than the body. And they loved that child. The child couldn't see. The child's hands were clenched. The child seemed to be in a vegetative state, not even an animal state. And his father would come home, Mark, and he would whistle just through his teeth. And the child would just about break a smile and respond. And that child, incidentally, lived past 3 months, past 3 years, outlived his mother, and only died when he was 27. But this is what I wanted to tell you the story about. My friend Mark would come home and sit at the side of the couch, whistle and stroke the hands. And he said, this reminded him of the incarnation. Because all I can do with my son is waste time. And I realized that from an eternal, sovereign, almighty God perspective, Jesus came to hang out with a bunch of clowns, creeps, and slow to get it folk. And God must have been wasting his time with these people. And so I hope you really love the incarnation and that it inspires and encourages you in youth work when you feel like you've just been wasting your time. But the Holy Spirit won't let it be wasted. So we waste time in listening to Avenue, a South End rapper, or Lamar, or Butterfly. We're listening to the stuff, and we're watching some stuff, and we're getting into some stuff that really isn't our stuff, but we're doing it so that we can ask questions about. And there's some amazing Boston rappers right now, by the way. Not well known, but stuff some of the kids haven't listened to. That'd be amazing to share with them and ask them about them. And have them interpret Black Panther to you? As I sat with that group of people and heard their reactions to it, I asked them, what's great about that film for you? Why is it different? And then we study, as we're going to do right now, at least we're just going to look at briefly, the expert researchers of culture and youth. And by the way, I'm really only going to give you the titles of their books because I think, first of all, they're so great, and it's all that we have time for. But I hope that you will see that the titles of these books that I'm just throwing at you can give you some insights. And then we need to bring this back to some discussions. So I hope that somebody might print out the Sakai PowerPoint and share it with a couple other youth workers or a couple people, leaders in their church, and just talk through some of the points. So there's Sherry Turkle. She said this. I mean, this almost would be enough for the next half hour. Technology doesn't just do things for us. It does things to us, changing not just what we do, but who we are. That's in the life of kids, almost right tonight. Just that. So she's this professor over at MIT, and she sat down with kids and she's watched them. One time, a kid, 8th grader, I think she was learning programming. And she said to Sherry Turkle, you know, now this computer has a little bit of my mind. And that was interesting. So here's 3 of Sherry Turkle's books that I really liked. Second Self, Life on the Screen, Alone. Take a brief look at when they were printed, when they were written, and what they say. The first one, and what she's about, I think, is understanding computers and cell phones, what they are doing to our minds and our relationships. That's what she's a specialist in my mind. And that's so important to me. I've really loved her for what she's doing there. The second self, what's that mean? The second self, Computers and the Human Spirit, 1984. And then Life on the Screen. I don't have mine right here. I put it away lots of times. We all have black mirrors, though. And there is a television series from Britain, one of these very ingenious ones. Our black mirrors. Looking at our black mirrors. And Life on the Screen, Identity in the Age of Internet. And I hope in this course that you have gotten a new grasp of the importance of identity. That is so important. We were talking about the identity of Jesus before. We were mentioning your identity. But some of your identities have been damaged by my people, my system. And that's a very crucial thing. I'm deeply sorry for that. And when you mess with a person's identity, and we're messing with identities big time these days in this country, and I'm really sorry. And I want to get a hold of the identities of people who are the most angry and the most hostile. And I would like to encourage their identity. Because the lack of identity can cause people to do some very desperate things, or very hostile things. And Life on the Screen, Identity in the Age of the Internet, 1997. So that was quite a time from her first book. And then I love this title. Alone Together. You started this class off talking about kids in the same room, in the same car, talking to each other by texting, not looking at each other. Alone together. Why we expect more from technology and less from each other. Wow. That's enough. benediction and go home. And then there's another woman who has been more expansive. I see Sherry Turkle from MIT getting down into what's really going on when that kid's sitting there or at the computer, at the TV. But this next person, Jean Twenge, I see her as looking at the whole horizon and seeing what's happening in the whole scheme of things. Professor of social psychology at the University of San Diego. Might be seen as expanding the work of Turkle to the effects of digital technology on this generation of youth in our society. She gathers her data and conclusions from 11 million U.S. teenagers, across all ethnicities and so forth. But remember that your kids are special, and their results are diluted in the 11 million. So you've got to look at the broad picture, but then you've got to look at your particular group. And then use the techniques and the questions and the generalizations of this larger stuff to inform you and what you're about. And I could list these four, and I have them here, Teens Today, Monitoring the Future, Centers for Disease Control on more sexual and diseases and some other things. But then she's used focus groups and survey to a few of these different categories. And there are 2-hour interviews with people individually. And she quotes that in her book, of course. So there she is. And that's her, not her latest book. Her latest book is getting in how we've got to learn to talk to each other, conversations today. But this was her earlier book. I love the cover. Generation Me, Why Today's Young Americans. Listen to this. This is millennials, okay? This is back to 06, millennials. Why today's young American millennials are more confident, assertive, entitled, and more miserable than ever before. And yes, the studies back that up. This is what the young people, teenagers themselves are saying. And then this latest book, isn't this the longest title you've seen of a popular book? And this is on the best read, the Times and so forth. It's 217, so this is bringing all the 11 million voices together, opinions. iGen, why today's super connected kids? Soak up each phrase here. Why today's super connected kids are growing up less rebellious against their parents, for instance. More tolerant, less happy, and completely unprepared for adulthood, and what that means for the rest of us. Now, if you don't have time to read these books, I'd almost, if I had to write, and I don't, I'd almost like to ask you to read this article, the next article of Jean Twenge's online. You can easily do it. There's the, you don't even need to take down that, what do you call it? Hey, I'm losing it. But just put Jean Twenge and the Atlantic in smartphones, certainly will get you there. And what she's showing is that the smartphone, I think, came out in 2007. And what she is showing is that the effect of the smartphone has made precipitous changes. So you pick up this book, and there are the charts of the results. Changes like this, hanging out. Changes like this in having sex. Changes in being home alone. And driver's license going down. These are dramatic, superimposed, that shows that culture changed radically with the smartphone in the hands of kids. A couple quotations from her. The allure of independence, so powerful to previous generations, holds less sway over today's teens. Again, The more time teens spend looking at screens, now she's really thin. And there's, by the way, there's one of the independent studies, apart from all that she did, right over there sitting there, I read off to you. The more times teens spend looking at screens, period, the more likely they are to report symptoms of depression. And we have a mental illness crisis, and a crisis before mental illness of stress and anxiety in our country today. And everybody, and Christians aren't aware of that. That's sad. Any questions or comments on Merkel and Kleingate? Any comments on that? Does this tend to collaborate what you are experiencing? Yes.
One thing people need to understand, the brain is not capable to distinguish between fiction and reality. Okay, to prove that very easy, when you watch a scare movie, you know that's a movie, but you still scared. Okay, that's prove your brain is not capable to distinguish between reality and fiction. What scared me the most now, I believe, a couple years from now, the image from the fictions will be so perfect, it's gonna look reality. People's not gonna be able to distinguish it there anymore. No, and if the people right now is messed already with the brain, a couple years from now, we can expect the things get way worse.
How will that affect a 16-year-old girl in your youth group?
A lot.
How?
Because you're not capable to distinguish what's fiction from reality. You can start to live fiction like fiction is reality. And then it's a big problem.
The young men across the country are saying that when sex is rough, as I mentioned before, on a girl, they smile. And girls are saying about that and some other things, sexual acts, there's 4 of them, that's featured very often on pornography. I don't like it, but if I don't do it, he'll do it with somebody else. And it's the power of, this is the perfection. And we know that how TV and advertising has already affected eating disorders, anorexia, someone to arrest. And also how much it's given men the sense that they have power to do anything to women. And I really needed to check my own sense that when I walk into a classroom I have power, and yet I don't feel powerful. And I don't want to be powerful. And yet, though I don't want it, and I'm not trying for it, just my being here gives me a power. And so if I treat you some way and use my power to get away with that, that's very dangerous. But then remember that what operates on the individual level is always geometrically greater on the systemic level. So what the advertising agents, what the gymnastics movement, what the pageants do to girls, and all these things are, and not that any of those things are all wrong, but what they can do is very concerning now. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, I just wish to say that we all agree and we understand that technology is playing a very devastating effect on the youth. And we are troubled in the church because we feel that it's affecting the way the church is going, as well as in the community. We can really see the things that are happening because of that, you know. So we know that the answer to what we are discussing here is Jesus, and it's what they don't want to hear. because you hardly find a youth who will create like 10 minutes to sit down with you and talk about Jesus instead of like using his phone to be searching left and right for what we don't know, which is where the problem is to me, because we can analyze, we can talk about the challenges we are facing in that area, how the youth, they are going astray and stuff, but we know we got the answer. As youth leaders, as pastors, as elders, we know the best answer to what we are talking about is taking the word of God to them, but the patience to keep away the phone for 1 minute to listen to the gospel is not there, which is another problem. If they were receptive to the gospel, we could say, okay, you could go out there, preach to them, get them to church, and at least you will be able like to bring about some, I mean, the Lord will do his job to get them out of the mess they are inside. So when I see all this, I'm asking myself, in the next 20 years, 30 years, what will become of them? Because we are talking of a type of a change that just happened some couple of years ago, and that today is without control. The state, I mean, the church is unable to put things in order. And here we are talking about it. The books have been written. The commentaries have been made. But we all know there is one answer. It is the Lord Jesus. It's a big challenge for us. I don't know.
Are you all getting this? Do you understand and generally agree? Well, I want to challenge that. I want to challenge your statement that the conclusion is the answer is the Lord Jesus. Because you already said at the beginning, you tell them about Jesus and they don't want to hear about it. So what is the answer? Because I believe deeply in my heart, I spent a lot of time of my life in Young Life, and the founder of Young Life, Jim Rayburn, had an incredible way with young people, of course, the culture back then. And he said that once a young person really sees and has presented to them the real Jesus, Christ, he becomes, in a sense, irresistible. Although there may be things in his or her life that will keep them the cost from committing themselves. So what I want to challenge about your final word there is this. That I think young people today need to find a vibrant, loving community, a teenage group, a teenage group of people that accept them, respect them from where they are, right where they are, without any conditions. Now, and then I believe, after a young person today feels the warmth and reception of a group, of a group, 8, 10, 12 more, and begins to develop a relationship with one older mentor who cares and understands and is tested for trustworthiness in every possible way. That it's through the beloved community, the peaceful place, the trustworthy place of people that care for one another, that they encounter, that they see, and particularly in the reality of one older, slightly older adult who cares about them. That it's in that context that Jesus can be presented in a way that they want to hear more about him and how he deals with all this. And that is to say that in Young Life, that organization, in contrast to some other organizations, in its beginning, but not so much today, but in its beginning, especially left the church. Left the church and went out to find young people in the high schools, highways and byways that weren't churchified, and developed relationships with them and brought them together in a place that was not Christian, but it was a fun place of acceptance where Jesus Christ was presented. That they heard about him through what was called the club, and then many of them who wanted to go went to what was called the camp. It was really a teenage resort. And then they heard the same series of presentations about Jesus. The person of Jesus, our need for Jesus, the work of Jesus in his life and on the cross, and what it means to be committed to Jesus. And at that camp, they experienced from work crew their own age volunteers, from summer staff of college age, and from the other program people, along with their counselors they had gotten to know and admire all year long. And in that context, young people in the 40s, the 60s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, and today, from urban and suburban areas, are making commitments and want to talk about Christ. Does it last? Not always. Now, if the enemy knows this, he's got two strategies, or three. The hypocrisies of conservative Christians and liberal Christians. Number one, that's what they're seeing. So, if they're not seeing Jesus, it's because we've thrown up the filter of hypocrisy. The second is the fall of great people. Great men of God who talk the talk and then have an affair. Or other stuff. Or take the money. And thirdly, and now this is coming home, so be prepared for it. The third strategy of the enemy in Boston, greater Boston, is divide and conquer. What young people see is a bunch of little silos. This Korean church against that Korean church, or in competition with that Korean church, this Chinese church and that Chinese church, this white church and that white church, this black church and that black church, Pentecostal, evangelical, Reformed, all divided, and nobody's got anything to do with the Catholics. He won. You did it great. Our kids aren't going to listen. Your strategies have taken over. So it starts right with the revival of the church. Are we willing to submit our growth and our church budget to the unity of all the churches we can see from here? That is an incredible challenge. And the problems of kids are all of adult makings. Yes. That's where the problems come from. And the problems of kids that can't see Christ are the adult Christians and the adult church. Which, by the way, is by adults, for adults, to adults. And teenagers are just welcomed. And that won't work. So you're right. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just have a question. So do you think we are at the right moment of time in history to rightly judge the effects of technology era? Because yeah, that's just a question that I'm having right now. For example, it's not the question, but just a...
Look, this has come up 2 or 3 times. Could I get right to that? Technology. Technology is built to be a servant of us. Yeah. Marshall McLuhan, technology. The hammer is the fist. The saw is the cutting edge of our nails. The car is our feet getting us there faster. All technology, the phone is an extension of our voice and our communicative desires. Technology is meant to be our servant, but it has become our masters. And the enemy wants it to become our masters. So the answer is incredible. A saw, a machete can do terrible things in Rwanda and elsewhere. Machetes are terrible, but they've done important work all the way through history. But when the machete became a tool of, and you know, there were Christians. You know, this happened in an area of the world that experienced what's called the East African Revival. And I've been there. And the East African Revival had its martyrs and so forth. It's been tremendous. So by the way, just a little cultural thing. Out of that revival, alcohol became a big thing. So if you go to East Africa today, Christians don't drink. If you go to West Africa today, except for the very conservative ones, Christians will drink. So I'm saying that this East African revival had a tremendous impact. But the power of French colonialism and imperialism, which has done so much damage in the world, is such that the French set up the Tutsis to be the rulers of the subordinated Hutus. And they played that to their own advantage, while they're also taking resources out and so forth, and paying up for politicians. And so these Rwanda Hutu Christians were suddenly seized by a spirit that principalities and powers were feeding up that came from wicked leaders to take and go out across the street, down the street, and slaughter a family that they had barbecues with in the past. And the process of reconciliation and forgiveness is just incredible. Lest we forgive, there's a little documentary you ought to see sometime. And so the technology thing that keeps coming up here, it can't be our masters. And we've thrown it at kids and taught them how they can be servants of the cell phone. We have, and our whole society has, for the profit of the big guys. For profit. And that's what spins the whole thing. The root of greed for money is the root of all evils in the world. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree everything you've said.
That was probably a little too much, but I guess
I wholeheartedly agree with what you've said. But just I'm thinking that there's a example. I can maybe when television was invented, people were saying that radio is gonna disappear at some point, and that's gonna change a lot, and people fear that there's gonna be no more radio stars, and but that was a huge part of their life at the time. But now it's proven that it was not really a big issue. Do you think? I'm not saying that it's the same issue, but do you think there's a repetitive fallen feature of the secular world that we have to take into consider when we look at the problems we're having right now? So, are we? So I'm just want to give a
go ahead.
benefit of doubt. Is there any positives about the technology?
Well, by the way, first of all, don't take any of my answers as true. Test them all, test them all. Think about it. I'm just saying what I've experienced and what I've got to give you. But technology is good. First of all, before it's bad, the printing press was fought. The pencil was fought. They had terrible fights over whether pencils should ever have erasers. It would make students careless. All these things. Writing. Plato objected to the whole fact of writing and teaching people to read and write, because he wanted a certain kind of, only the philosophers should be able to do all that. And so every technological advancement in history has been objected to, has been fought.
But do you think it's
and it's like rock music. Very few think that all rock music is double music. And you know, there used to be the stories of how a missionary kid was playing the radio and playing Larry Norman or something like that, and all the native Christians came running in and said, that's devil music, that's what witch doctors use. Well, you know, so culture is very complicated. And it's good before it's bad. Technology is good, but it's getting increasingly complex. So do you believe in internet freedom? Or do you want internet control? Well, the internet was seen to be this glorious demographic thing that would take everyone and lift us up together in a beautiful way. But we can see that the iGods of Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, these are the gods that have gotten so big. Each one of them is competing for total control of the world. And that's documented, you know. And there's both a Christian book by Greg Detweiler, not of Boston, but out west, iGods, look it up on Amazon, that will take these 5 iGods and just really show you philosophically and apologetically just how they're playing out to be Babylon, to rule Babylon. And we have Babylon and Jerusalem. And we're living in Jerusalem, and we've got to learn to live in Babylon. And Jeremiah helps us with that. You know, pray for the peace of the city of Babylon. So we're at war with Babylon, but we still got to make for ourselves friends of the children of Mammon. And that's very, very complicated. So, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to bring the cell phone down off its throne, like every other thing we've done, and the computer. And we've got to say, we're disciplined. We have to learn a discipline of dropping the phone and letting people know that we don't answer immediately. We don't have to answer immediately.
I don't know. I just want to chip in something here. When I read your book, I mean, it was in chapter 8, I discovered that you made a comment like, the changing roles of mothers and fathers, the absent father, and the prevalence of divorce are all having profound effects on children. So I want to find out if is it like with the disorder or the collapse of the family, the youth have taken upon themselves to look for comfort using this technology? Can we say they are?
Yeah, we can say that. And remember, it's very, very complicated. When did the family begin to weaken? And when was the family strong? And was the family ever as strong in modern times as we like to think it was strong? And was there a golden age in the 1950s? And we'd have to look at all those things and debunk the myths and try to go back and see what reality really was all along the way. But there's all kinds of things that weaken the family right now, isn't it? It's the financial press in an unequal society where so much of an ungodly percentage of the money is at the very, very top. And it's the very, very top that's controlling the politicians. And the politicians are getting there with the money that comes from the very top to do it their way. A little more complicated than that, of course. But and so in this world, I doubt that there's many in you that don't have some financial stress as you look ahead and so forth. And so when all kinds of things are happening, we are now rightly educating girls and telling women that they should be on an equal footing with men, and they should be professional, and they should excel in their field, and be expert in their field. And then at the same time, when our Christian women get to that point, they also have a very, very strong impulse to be married and to have children. And the tension between raising children that will tend to fall a little more on the mother than the father, although both should share. But just the two-family working, the two-job families that are necessary to live in Boston are weakening the family. And then you come home beat, and you want to watch the Celtics. Tonight are playing, by the way. Or as we speak. And so you want to relax, and the guy relaxes his way, the father and the mother. And then a hypersexualized world in which both the woman and the man is being tempted at work in so many ways. And then, do you know the percentage of pastors that are into pornography? Pastors. And then you take the percentage of Christian men in general, and that's really higher. You're up around 50% now. And these are incredible numbers. Incredible numbers. I don't know that I can fully trust those numbers, but the people that are working this area are telling me it's that high. And so you've got so many things that's working in the family. And then the burden on grandparents are increasing. And that's why I could do youth work today. Do you know that, at my age? Because kids growing up right now have a grandparent hunger. And I'm respected differently. So in my life in youth ministry, I was first of all a big brother. For years, I was sort of a big brother figure. And then I got to be, later on, a father figure. And now I've got to be a grandfather figure, and you know what? This is the easiest yet. Because there's a hunger for that. And grandparents are forced to fill in as parents all over the place these days. And so this whole matter of the family that I'm sure Dr. Ward has brought up and has another course to deal with it. But if you really want to know, I have gone from young life, youth ministry is about reaching kids and getting their parents' permission. And I actually back there did more going into homes because I was crazy. I would just go by, and if they were eating, I'd say, hey, I just want to say hi, I'm going. Or if they seemed to be open to talk, I'd talk, and I did all that. But I wasn't committed to family ministry. Are you hearing me? I was youth ministry. They come in from junior high, we're working with them, they go off to college, we get the next group, and so forth, and I was into youth ministry. And then finally, I heard and wisened up to the fact that I needed to be promoting youth and family ministry. And that was a challenge. Now I'm becoming even more radical. You know what I believe? I believe now that every youth minister should consider herself or himself an aid to parents. An aid to parents. They, the parents and the grandparents, are the lifetime youth ministers for every kid. Or youth workers if they're not Christians. I make that distinction. And I try to deal with both. An awful lot that we deal with youth ministers is applicable to youth workers. And so I work with both. Yes?
Would you maybe just define that a little bit better? Just ministers versus workers.
Yeah. Well, I think our brother here brought it up, that the family. This stuff is so complicated. How's it affecting the family? And where are families going these days? And the family is weakened by all things, but those that are struggling against all the obstacles to a strong family are having some incredible times together. And the basic one, my brother wrote a book. He was a literature professor. He wrote a book, Television, Friend or Foe. And he had been against television. This goes back to your question again. So back then, in the 50s, he was against television. His kids converted him to watching these shows. And he began to see that there was really some good stuff in the shows. And so he wrote this book. But his conclusion was that the most important thing, and he sort of impressed this on me, and this was my field,